I'm so sorry. I'm checking my notes. Tito, was the question, hey, can you brag about your kids for a bit? Because I think that's the one got answered.
Welcome back to Bread and Butter, where we are serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement. You would think that would not be a tongue twister after 78 episodes, but it still is. Unfortunately, Doc could not be here tonight. The gods of electricity decided that he was not going to have any, and we were able to find a couple people of a similar build. So, special guests, we have Stormraige. Stormraige, how are you tonight?
I just became terrible.
How about yourself there, Steve? JustAGuy, how are you?
I'm doing good, Tito. How are you?
I am fantastic. I just saw these wonderful gentlemen a couple days ago. We just had a Blizzlit community night out of nowhere, like an RKO, and it was a lot of fun. We did some Quiplash, and JustAGuy was dominant at times.
JustAGuy was in reset mode as the game had to start over a few times.
Anytime that JustAGuy was leading, we all agreed that something had gone wrong and we had to restart the game. So you did win one round, though, I believe.
If you can figure out how my life can operate the same way, where you're just sort of not happy exactly where you are and you get to start over, that'd be pretty cool. No, it's.
I'll do my best to get on that.
It's actually always a very good time. It's really one of the unexpected pleasures of having years ago now joined the Blizzlit Discord.
Ha-ha!
There, I said something nice for you.
Aww.
We'll clip that and put that somewhere. One thing you do need to know about JustAGuy is he hates emojis. We learned that this week too.
I think JustAGuy would enjoy emojis if he knew how to use them. But that is not something that is within his wheelhouse currently.
So it's interesting that I actually have a texting app set up on my phone that adds the old numeric keypad where you have to actually press the letter 3 times sometimes to get to the letter you want, because that's actually what I'm used to for texting. So I haven't evolved beyond that. If you expect me to add pretty pictures to everything, it is going to be sad for everybody. It's just not going to happen.
All right, 2 thoughts on that. I used to use that. So in when I was a radar operator in the Army, we used to have to use the numeric keypad to send messages. And we used to, way before texting was a thing, we used to be able to send messages back and forth through from one radar to another. And they were supposed to be like supportive messages, but we were like there 24 hours a day. So it was more like shooting the BS about whatever we were talking about. And you're sitting there texting like that. And it was kind of nuts. But
I think you're talking about Morse code. I'm actually a little bit younger than that.
No. It was keypad. You had to type a keypad 3 times and all that. And the other thing is, you would think that JustAGuy could figure out the emojis because he does in fact own a computer store and does do tech support involving computers. Yeah. So you think that when grandma asks, how do I put this emoji of an eggplant in my message to my grandfather or whatever, that he'd be able to figure it out, but it's just not there. But
it's one of the few certifications I haven't gone for. Is that Microsoft emoji certification?
Oh, that's what all the kids are wanting though nowadays. I don't want a computer unless I know how to add emojis to it. What are you doing?
Yeah, I went through the whole security and I skipped over the emoji day.
You also get yeeted out of slang day too. But anyway, JustAGuy, what have you been up to in the world of Hearthstone?
I've been playing a little bit of everything, sort of the way I normally do. A little bit of Battlegrounds, bunch of Standard, with a slow climb of my typical getting bored with certain decks and sort of mixing it up so that I keep sort of backing up every now and then until I find something I land on and stick with for a while. But I'm having fun with it. I've played more Arena than I have in a while. Occasionally remember to go and hit the Tavern Brawl just to get back there. Usually that's a Ben Heathstone reminder. You have to go and jump on and take care of that. But no, there's been then a little bit of here, a little bit of there. And so it's actually been a fun time. I know a lot of people tend to get a little bit stalled out and bored with.
Did you just
pointed to your head and
you looked at me.
Subjective. It was terrible.
I
pointed at your head and I
myself, and JustAGuy went.
I did
like the Austin Powers movie. That scene where Austin Powers meets the new agent and he's got a mole, and all he can say is mole. That happened, but JustAGuy went bored.
I'm a little bit bored. I'm a little bald as well, but I'm a little bit bored as well. But yes, I did get distracted briefly.
To be fair, he could have been looking at me. He could have been looking at me because I definitely am missing a few hairs on the old noggin.
I'm no one's hairline to be
in. Well, awesome. Stormraige, what have you been playing in the world of Hearthstone?
I've been playing a lot of different things in a pretty minimal manner. I was on vacation for about a week for a while, and I didn't play a whole lot of Hearthstone other than a couple Battlegrounds games while I was gone. And coming back, it's just the constructed game mode. I'm in a weird spot with where the balance is fine, and I actually like Insanity Warlock, but outside of that deck, there's just a lot of very frustrating things, and there is no deck that I hate more in the world than a Highlander deck. And Highlander isn't insanely powerful, it isn't insanely popular, but it's powerful enough and popular enough that whenever I see Reno play, I just go, I'm just not going to play today. And so I'll just usually close the app and be done for the day. And I haven't played a ton. My rank is not where it typically is. I usually finish somewhere between Diamond 5 and Legend. But this month, I'm at gold across the board, and my Battlegrounds is just barely above 7K, and so my ranks aren't exactly where I think they probably should be, based on my skill level, but I haven't put in a whole lot of time, so I needed to do that and grind a little bit on across the ladders. I've enjoyed a little bit of Twist, I've enjoyed a little bit of Standard, but if I play too much, I run into Reno, and then I get mad.
It's fair. All right.
Are you duoing in Battlegrounds, or have you sort of gotten away from it after the initial?
After the initial, I've kind of backed away from it. I still like the concept of it, and I think when I get into my mode of wanting to play a lot more, I'll go back to it, which will be soon. I imagine this next week where I have nothing to do during the day, as long as I don't find any weird obsession video game, which has happened a lot in the past of Baldur's Gate, or right now I'm playing a really weird game that I'll talk about here soon, or anything along those lines, then I'll probably play a lot more Hearthstone in the next few weeks.
Did you ever queue up into random duos, or just always organized with somebody? Okay.
That's usually
so I've discovered to my annoyance that occasionally the app likes to change from regular Battlegrounds to duos all by itself.
Yep.
So I'll close out, log in, pick my hero, get ready to go, and all of a sudden there's this weird portal on the side.
Yep.
And I'm like, ooh, I was not quite ready for that. And then you can't just sort of bail on whoever you're playing with, because you feel like you sort of were a bit of a jerk to them. So yeah, that I found to be a little weird, that it just switches, and I'm not used to double checking every time I queue up. So that's usually how I end up into.
And that's how you found your way into a golden mini set too, I believe. But actually, I've never seen it switch, and I've been playing duos too, but usually it's at the end of.
Are you saying I'm lying? Are you saying I'm doing something wrong, and I just don't have the cognitive ability to recognize that I switched over to duos? What are you trying to say?
I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I love no bit more than putting JustAGuy's faults at his own feet. But I will say I've also experienced this of the duos button randomly getting flipped on and being like, what? Okay.
So this might be the problem, that I don't notice it because I'm usually in duos mode, because I have not played a whole lot of normal Battlegrounds this month. But at the end of stream, Pilot and I tend to play at least one or two games and go from there. And I've had a lot of fun. I'm surprised that I initially thought that duos was going to be one of those things that was kind of like Mercenaries. That was going to be hot for a couple weeks, and then everyone was going to drop off of it. I was wrong. Duos is fantastic. I love it.
Right.
It's just it's a fun mode, and I'm surprised that it's so engaging, and it stayed engaging. So I like it. It's great. So for me, there's going to be a little self-promotion. So I apologize in advance, but I don't, because this is what I'm here for. This week, my family went on a vacation without me. I stayed home with the dogs because that saves a lot of money, and especially ended up working out pretty well with my lack of a job recently. So all that considered, I have time to do a streaming event, and I'm a small streamer, no qualms there. I'm trying to build up a community. So I thought, hey, let's go ahead and stream all week and make an event out of it. And so far, it's been day 2. We've had a lot of good interactions. But the best thing is we also have a couple things going on. We are giving away, courtesy of Blizzard, courtesy of Amberflight Gaming, a standard bundle for Perils in Paradise. Was not expecting this when I planned everything out, but as you know, I joined AFG, and Dragon Rider was kind enough to gift me with one of these to gift to other people. So we're doing it in a different way. A lot of times you see these events where people say, hey, be on the stream this day, and sometime during the day I will raffle it off, and you type /ticket in Twitch, and whoever wins, wins. We're not doing it that way. I'm using it to try to build some engagement with you, the listener. So there's several different ways you can enter. You can, and you're only going to hear about this particular one here. If you email Bread and Butter, that's BreadNbuttr at gmail.com, and you can tell us one of a few things. You can tell us your favorite topic. You can tell us a topic you'd like to hear from in the future. You can tell us your favorite guest, and you can tell us your guest you would like to see in the future. As long as it's not just a guy, then you will have an entry into the event.
Seems unnecessarily rude.
I know. The funny thing is...
if I got treated well, I would know where I was.
The funny thing is a lot of times, like, so I feel like Steve is a close personal friend, right? And we joke back and forth, and we have this sense of humor. So sometimes he'll say something out in public, and I'll give him grief for it. And everyone's probably like, why is Tito so mean to JustAGuy? But it's kind of the humor that we have back and forth. So I think, to me, you're probably laughing at it.
Kidding when you do that all this time?
Okay, well, no.
Haha! You have to add in the laughter afterwards.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay.
Okay, so
said something.
That's okay. So outside of that,
my kids do the same thing, so I'm sure they must not be serious either.
Maybe. At least they're talking to you. So emailing the show at breadandbutter@gmail.com is one way to enter the contest. The other ways to get entries is you can give a 5-star review on iTunes for either Bread and Butter or Talkin Hearthstone, which is my new podcast. It's Talkin Hearthstone. It's talking because it's like with an apostrophe because I'm from New England, whatever. So 5-star reviews there. 5-star reviews at bonusroll.gg, which is kind of got a podcast directory of all Blizzard games. Each time you do any one of these, you'll get one entry. You can also listen to Talkin Hearthstone. I give you an idea on how to enter there. And then finally, for the stream that I'm doing now for the rest of the week, between 5 and midnight Eastern Standard Time, PM, for the rest of the week, if we have little games and we have little things, ways to get entries, and you can challenge me in Hearthstone. Sometimes we just have random ones. If I did something like beat the first boss of Hades finally, Hades 2, and we just give it a bunch of entries. Most importantly, and I know this is going on a little while, I apologize. Most importantly, we are donating money to the Trevor Foundation. The what's the word?
Trevor Project.
Trevor Project. And for every donation up to, I think, $800, Amberflight Gaming is doing a match. And every time you donate to this, you get 10 entries. This is even like the most important part of the week. So you can get 10 entries into this. And I'm not a big streamer. I don't have I don't have crypt level audience. So this, if you're one of those people that farms, you don't like to pay for the bundles, you farm all the opportunities to get free ones. I'm not judging you. I do the same thing. However, this is a good opportunity because no one is watching. There are very few entries, and I want you to watch. So come on down, hang out. Anyway, outside of that, I have a goal for this month in Hearthstone. I want to stay. So I have my main goal is I want to hit under 5,000 in Legend. My backup goal is I want to stay 4 digits. And then my other goal is I want to do as well as I can. So far, we've been hovering under 5,000, which has been great for me. We crested it a couple times, and then we readjusted and went down. I've been down as low as 2,500. I came in at 700 recently. But we're playing really well for us, and we're hopefully adjusting our MMR. So I've been very, very excited about that. And the nice thing about it is I have zero ladder anxiety. Like, even if I get to 5,000 and I'm just like, okay, we got to fix this, I'm not feeling anxious about it. And this is kind of a huge change for me. And I think it's I played well the last few months, and I think it's making a difference. So
well, it's nice. It's very cool to see how active you've been, and it's really admirable to see the hours that you've put in, because I mean, Daniel and I both know that grinding out to get to Diamond 5, let alone Legend, let alone high rank Legend, is really a huge commitment, and you really can burn out pretty early on and just sort of get to the point where, you know, none of us want to play the game where you feel like it's a chore and you're getting sort of negative about it. And sometimes, you know, you fall into a meta that just isn't rolling your way and you don't like some of the decks that you keep running into. And so it's easy to sort of, you know, get kicked off your path. And you've really done a really nice job staying with it and putting in the hours. And I hope the job thing comes around sooner than later, you know, which is also an important thing to not necessarily gloss over. So hopefully that works out. But also a big shout out to Dawn, because that's a quality human being on every level that you possibly.
I completely agree. And to Daniel's point, I've seen some weird decks. Like I've been hitting little mini pocket metas where I'm seeing the same deck over and over again. I've been seeing the aggro DH, which is really good. If you have the choice between killing a Slither Spear and the Sock Puppet, kill the Sock Puppet. Trust me. I've seen
number of times I've said that.
I know, right? And I've seen JustAGuy's, I think it's JustAGuy's. It's like a shaman that you play a lot of Murlocs, and then you want to play this nostalgia card, and it makes them all legendary minions from the past. And I keep seeing these decks. Like I see 2 out of 3 games, I see the same weird deck and all that. So it's weird. But JustAGuy, what have you been doing outside of this wonderful game of Hearthstone?
Oh goodness, there's a life outside of it. You know, actually, the 2 semi-interesting things that have never been part of my life that I just recently added were chiropractor and acupuncture.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Korra and Sage.
No, they've been part of it more than they wanted. But no, I'm almost 2 weeks into trying to find some hopeful improvement to, without getting negative and falling down a rabbit hole. My sort of chronic back issues.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've gone down months and months and months with, you know, MRIs and x-rays and talking to doctors and getting really fed up with the way things are going. And so it's at the point where it's like, well, I'd prefer not becoming a prescription drug addict if I can avoid it. So it's sort of at the point where, you know, well, what can I try that I haven't done before? And at this point, the chiropractor has not paralyzed me, so that's a win.
That is a win.
And I have not bled out from acupuncture, so that's also a win.
2 for 2.
And they've also actually, where I sort of landed on it, been just the most delightful place. That was sort of far better than anything I could have imagined. So it was a sort of weird place to go. For those who have any idea about me, my dad was a doctor, so my brain is very, very deeply founded in sort of practical medical treatments. So, and it's certainly not that I discount homeopathic treatments or alternatives, but it isn't usually something that I've had to go into and experiment with. So this was sort of new for me. So far so good. It shows some improvement. We'll see.
My whole family has done a lot of acupuncture actually and swears by it. I haven't gone a whole lot. I went when I was like a teenager and I haven't gone back since, but they've seen some pretty remarkable improvements from it.
Hard to argue with 5,000 years of Chinese.
Impossible, really.
This is just a reminder that you are listening to 2 old white guys and 1 middle-aged white guy Hearthstone podcast, and also we're old men. But Daniel, what have you been doing outside of the game?
Outside of the game, I've been doing a lot. I've been the dumbest thing that I've been doing, and it's very dumb. There is a game that I recently bought because it was on my kind of I saw it scrolling through Steam and I was like, this looks fun. And it's called Esports Godfather. And it is terrible. It's just a really poorly done game. Like, not in the game mechanics itself, but it's clear that it was written either in Chinese or Japanese. I'm unsure of the language. And then, like, literally Google translated over. And so there's so many aspects to it that are just straight up bad. And the writing is terrible, but I can't stop playing it because I really want to beat the game. So I'm going to continue to play it because, again, I need to beat the game. And I've been doing a lot of that. I've also been playing a decent amount of Overwatch with my partner lately, and that's always a blast and a half. I enjoy that game a lot, even though I have a lot of issues with other aspects about how that game is run. And then I'm very excited. I have my very first performance at a Ren Fair coming up. I am performing at the Pocatello Ren Fair, and that'll be this Friday and Sunday is when I'm performing. I'm really excited about it.
Are we madrigaling or what are we doing?
So we are doing a improvised D&D set that's like a 30-minute improv plus Dungeons and Dragons style comedy, and hopefully it'll be pretty fun.
Do they know you're performing? Is it one of those you have to sneak in and just hope?
It's a great question. I'm still hopeful they're not going to throw us out. They haven't promised that they won't, but we've got a good feeling about this year.
That's awesome.
It's Hello Ren Fair. Those are words I haven't heard.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, have you heard many sentences that start with Pocatello and then end with anything?
It's actually fantastic. It's one of the things that I miss the most. We had back when I used to live in a place outside Chicago, the King Richard's Fair years and years and years ago that evolved into the Bristol Renaissance was one of the best times. And so, yeah, that's actually one of the things that I miss greatly. There is one or two, I think, out here that are certainly smaller in scale, but definitely worth going. Those are an absolute.
Were you ever on the East Coast? How do you know about King Richard's Fair?
King Richard's Fair was the original name of the main Renaissance Fair. It used to be, I'm sure there were several King Richard's Fair. We're talking about a long time ago that it renamed. I think Bristol Renaissance is.
Were you, JustAGuy, were you around during King Arthur's original court? Is that where this came from?
It was, and actually I had the opportunity to pull the sword from the stone, but it just seemed like such a huge amount of hassle and responsibility.
Oh, it's a lot.
And I left it alone.
That's a good call.
What an amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic, and that sounds exciting, Daniel. Good for you. I love the fact that you are so involved in like your local theater. It's just a wonderful thing. You just directed a show, right? You want to tell a little about that?
Yeah, I directed a show. It's called Proof down at my local theater, and it's a show. It's a more serious show about a woman whose father was a genius mathematician but went mad, and so the story is kind of following her after her dad's death to try and understand whether or not she is a genius or whether she's crazy or maybe she's both. And it's a very small 4-person cast, but it went really, really well. And I think it was a good old time.
Oh, fantastic. So for me, as far as outside of Hearthstone, like I said, my family's on vacation. I'm doing the streaming thing. I'm still looking for a job. My job is to look for a job, as it is. On Saturday, as I was getting ready for my streaming event to start, I decided to do things, and I was like, well, let me clean out the fridge, get rid of all the produce that's going to go bad because I'm not going to, eat green stuff. And in the end, I am doing a deep cleaning of the refrigerator. I'm taking it apart, taking the glass off, getting under things that I've been meaning to do for a while. I'm like, yeah, this is a great time to do it when I need to be prepping for something else.
Yep.
ADHD is a wonderful thing.
It sure is.
Speaking of that, I've also mentioned this before. I started a new podcast called Talkin Hearthstone, and it's kind of along the lines of a combination, say, of walk to work and off curve. So, we'll see how that goes. I'm excited about it, and I kind of like talking. Like this show right here, we try to keep, for the most part, not necessarily about the current news, but more evergreen and talking about topics that can help you regardless of when you listen to it. And we have the wonderful guests, like our 2 guests this week. So we try to have a different voice on other podcasts, but this one is like more, hey, this is my, verbal thoughts. And I'm just going to talk because I like to talk and I love Hearthstone. So it seemed like the thing to do. But sometimes you need a vacation. We have a new set. I think we mentioned it last week. We definitely mentioned it last week because we actually timed our episode to have conversation about it last week. It's Perils in Paradise. So far, there's not too many cards yet, so we're still seeing most of the reveals of some not commons, neutrals, and not really a whole lot of class cards yet. So we're not going to really go too deep into it. We have a whole other topic to talk about. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll start breaking down some classes and talk about general directions they might be going. But for now, I just wanted to know, initially, what are your thoughts on the theming there, JustAGuy?
I honestly, I'm going to tell you in a purely subjective opinion that this is possibly one of the most interesting, fun, exciting, fascinating sets that I think has come along. Probably, I would put it on a level with Nathria. Those two, for whatever reason, sort of stand out to me of all the sets that have ever existed.
Yeah,
as really sort of 1A and A1.
Now, can you talk a little bit about because you're somewhat familiar with Hearthstone? Who was the set lead for Nathria?
Oh, hang on a second.
Do you have your notes with you?
Probably in my note. Oh, wait a second. Okay, so that was Cora.
Oh,
Georgiou.
okay.
So
okay.
Cora, it looks like that was Cora Georgiou's set.
And then who's leading Perils in Paradise?
Oh, gee, has that actually been? Oh, wait, it was announced by probably somebody who knew. That would be Sage. That would be Sage. Same last name, Georgiou. That would be Geor. Anyway. Wow, what an amazing
how
coincidence.
Unique. Yeah.
That those two preeminent game designers and unbelievably quality human beings would actually come up 1A and A1 when it comes to the expansion.
A follow-up question.
It is my son's set.
Follow-up question.
Sage has been, just for the sake of anyone listening who's like, who? Wait, he has two? I haven't been very public about the fact that I have two kids that are both on Hearthstone. So this may be news to a few people. But yeah, they both are. And you might have seen Cora. She's been a little more visible. I think she actually was on the stage at BlizzCon a couple of times. So that you might have, caught her as she was there. Sage has been a little bit less public. He has a Twitter account, but he is a very intelligent human being who avoids social media.
That's smart.
Which is hard to fault. But let's make sure that anyone listening knows that my opinion is very much the only one that matters in this case. And that's both my kids are freaking amazing. And this set, which is Sage's first as set lead, is really something that I know he's put an awful lot of time and effort into, and I think it's really going to deliver. I'd also like to throw in a plug because, again, I was given permission, and I do have to sort of check here and there with some of the things I can say. The arena turnaround that has been very visible over the last several months has been entirely Sage's doing. They basically asked him if there was something he wanted to work on apart from designing the cards and working on the expansions and the sets like they all do. And he had always been a huge fan of Arena and had played it almost exclusively when he first started playing Hearthstone. And he took it and could not have delivered changes that I think the last time I looked, it actually was bouncing up to engagement levels that are similar to Battleground. That's an amazing freaking achievement. And it is so cool to see what he's done to this point, and they're still putting more focus on it, and they're still working on some new things that nobody has seen or heard about yet that's really going to even enhance it. I would like to see him get a little bit more recognition for it, because I really do think he's been a little bit behind the scenes too much, and he really does deserve a little more visibility. So yeah, pretty cool to see him come out with the set.
I'm so sorry. I'm checking my notes. Tito, was the question, hey, can you brag about your kids for a bit? Because I think that's the one got answered.
It's here in my notes. I don't know if I put it in the show notes for you guys, but it's there. I do have an agenda.
So bringing us back to the topic.
Did you ask a question when this started?
Stormraige.
I sort of got sidetracked.
Stormraige, what are your thoughts on the theming?
Oh, the theming. You
set?
asked about the theming. I answered. It was a little verbose.
I like the theming. I'm always torn whenever a new set comes out because theme is probably the thing that I care about most when it comes to a set. Like cards, fine. I like cards, but I'm not the kind of Hearthstone player that I focus so much on the mechanics of the card. I want to know that the cards tell a story and that the cards are fun or interesting from a flavor perspective, because like the mechanics and the balance, you can figure that out later. So I'm most interested in like major keywords, overall theming, overall flavor, things of that nature. And Perils in Paradise is pretty high in all those accounts. My main complaint about Perils in Paradise is the lack of kind of some basic things that we've seen in the past. We haven't seen a game board, we haven't seen a cinematic, we haven't seen a song, and all of those things build such flavor for me. And obviously I can't blame the set lead for that. That's someone else's decision way far away. So I think from the cards that we've seen, from the general theming, I'm all in, but it does feel like it's missing its heart from that perspective. So I like a lot of it. I like the keywords. I like the cards that we've seen. I like a lot of things. Essentially the things that a set lead could control. I'm a fan of all of those. There are also wide cost-cutting measures that are seeming to come down from the top that I am not a fan of.
I could not agree with you. And I when I heard that this was some of the changes that they had sort of decided to implement, I was concerned as well, because I understand. Nobody has opened up the Blizzard books to me and said, "Hey, JustAGuy, why don't you take a look at these and tell us where you think we could, make a little more money here or cut some expenses there, and what you think makes sense, and we'll just do whatever you think," which honestly would not be the worst thing that they could do.
Oh, I know exactly where I cut things.
Okay, careful. But no, I was concerned about some of it as well. And change is always going to initially be met with a little bit of resistance when it comes to people sort of wondering if the change is going to be better for the actual players or not. Because in my experience, often when sort of somebody in management makes changes for the employees, it's usually not for the better.
Yeah.
But yeah, the lack of a game board and the lack of it, I did really like, I think, and universally people really liked the boarding flight airplane video that they released as sort of an alternative to the cinematic. I thought that was just absolutely fantastic and just amazingly well done. But yeah, I liked the accoutrements that go along with the expansions. And I did think it was a little bit of a letdown to not have sort of what you expected when they announced the expansion show up the same way you're used to.
And for those that are curious, I do not believe B is on the Microsoft payroll, because she seems to be adamant. She seems to be very aggressively trying to get JustAGuy to stop talking about certain things in the background. So if you hear that, it's there. So I like the theming. I like the vacation. I'm a little disappointed in a couple things. I thought that we were going to have kind of like the 10th anniversary kind of theme throughout the entire year, and not just in that wonderful set. Who was the set lead for Whizbang's workshop?
Whizbang? Good Lord again. That was Cora again. Oh, it's amazing. That girl can just take on so many hats. It's absolutely amazing. Just something. And that was a great expansion as well. And yes, I do like the theming, which was your question about 45 minutes ago when I asked it originally. I think it's perfect, obviously, given the time of year, unless you're a Blister guy and you're talking about the dead of winter. It really works well given when it's being released. And I also think that sort of some of the concerns and criticism, and I think they've released, a whole like dozen cards so far. And obviously, I occasionally glance at some of the social media reactions to things. I think B, not even up here. It really is a situation where it's really difficult with a game that's now existed for over 10 years to reinvent the wheel every time you go to bat, which is a really odd analogy.
I like it.
It's really hard to come up with something new. I mean, there's only so many ways to sort of spin certain mechanics with the way the cards work in the game. And it is interesting to come up with themes. I know there's an awful lot of people out there that really enjoy lore-based themes. The World of Warcraft faithful that really want to see Hearthstone reflect what they've seen and played and experienced in years of playing World of Warcraft. And I think that there's a place for that certainly as well. But I think the more casual players and a lot of people who play Hearthstone who never played World of Warcraft, or at least didn't play it particularly long, are really sort of more entertained by sort of the lighthearted expansions that aren't necessarily something you need to go get a book and read up on, understand where everything's coming.
I've always felt like when they do more serious sets, there needs to be an additional theme underneath it. Like, for instance, Nathria was a more serious kind of World of Warcraft based set, but it also had like a murder mystery vibe to it. And so even if you weren't familiar with World of Warcraft, you also still got this really cool murder mystery aspect to it. And there was still a lot of flavor with Nathria. My least favorite set of all time is March of the Lich King, because it was just, here's kind of a section of World of Warcraft, but not really. It's kind of now, but it's also super not now, and it's also super not in the past. And there wasn't anything twisted about it. Like, it wasn't, and it's also the Lich King at the beach, which I, for the record, would have loved. If they were just like, here's Lich King going on a barbecue, I would have been super down with that. It was just like, here's the intense, gritty, blah, 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 blah. And like, those sets I have no interest theme-wise. I either want something that's fun and lighthearted, like Perils in Paradise, Wizbank's Workshop, Festival of Legends is also an all-time favorite of mine, or something that is more serious, but has a twist to it, something that's interesting about it, other than just serious, look at this, blah, blah, blah.
So I just got a text from B saying that she's now a community manager and is just trying to get JustAGuy not to self-incriminate. So,
you know what?
That's necessary.
That could do with a lot worse than B as an associate community.
Yeah.
So to bring it back, I like the theming. One thing I don't like is the fact that Taurus is the keyword, because I like the concept of Taurus. I like the idea of it, but it's kind of weird that we're not actually getting a new keyword that's actually gameplay.
I can tell you that they had, I want to say, probably 12 or more keywords that they were implementing and testing and mulling around and seeing what they wanted, and stuff that I thought several of them thematically were actually really cool, and the effects were, but there's always considerations that go into it with how it affects other sets, how it affects other cards. And again, people like things that are new and interesting. Nobody likes stuff that breaks the game. And goodness knows, last time I checked, every time you add any kind of, step on a butterfly in the past effect, Wild blows up and turns into something just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then the screaming and the shrieks and the crying become, the lamentations of the women are just awful. And so it's a situation where, there's considerations of a lot of it. There's also consideration that not a lot of people know behind the scenes, that you have to implement something that their, taped together engineering side of the game actually can work with as well. So I'm surprised when they actually get some of the card effects and some of the things that they've deployed to work, because I've seen how difficult it is. The game seems to have been, designed on, a Texas Instruments calculator, and it's really interesting to see how much of a struggle it is for them to tweak and add cards and make changes, and for Sage to mess with Arena when, he's trying to add certain sets or frequencies and everything else. So it's another thing that I think most people don't realize. When my kids got hired to do this job, I literally thought they were going to sit around and come up with cards all day. That was going to be the job. And that is such a small part of it. It's absolutely frightening. You just don't understand all the weirdness.
Now, I've actually, I get most of my news from Blizzlet podcasts, and from what I understand, what you were talking about, Wild, that doesn't exist.
Correct.
So what do you guys...
I may have misspoken.
That's fair. So
I may have been thinking about Marvel Snap, which those game designers, those designers get to come up with about 6 cards a year, which, that's the kind of, I think my kids could sign up for that in a heartbeat. I think they've got like 3 people. They sit around, they come up with 1 card a month, and they go, that's a nice job.
Fair enough. So, but what are your guys' thoughts on the actual keyword tourist? Like, so basically what happens is each class has a different class that they get to take cards from this current set from outside of their tourist. You can't chain tourists, which would be kind of crazy.
I like say the keyword one more time for me.
Tourist?
Tourist.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's an East Coast pronunciation, but I heard tourist. It's a terrorist.
Tourist.
Nailed it.
So
we're talking about Harvard Yard.
So I'm guessing
What
the
is
design
on Harvard Yard.
Yeah, you park your car on Harvard Yard, drink from a bubble. It's a wicked piss of a hey, it's I. Anyway, I think
they hadn't made it out to Idaho yet, apparently.
So I think with tourists, it's interesting. I think it probably terrifies final design.
We didn't get Daniel's opinion on it.
He'll get it. He'll get it soon. I'm waiting for Tito to finish his point here.
Yeah, you're belaboring my point there, Mr. JustAGuy. So I think it's an interesting concept. I think that design is probably terrified of it because now it's like, well, is this going to break Rogue? Is this going to break the class that Tourist and Rogue? And how are you going to balance that? And I can guess why they didn't make it so that way it was back and forth or open season, because if it was open season, who knows? You don't want to have to. That's just a nightmare. Daniel, what are your thoughts on it?
I'm stoked about it. This feels like dual class cards on crack. And dual class cards are some of my favorite stuff. I like seeing cards represented in different formats. They don't always hit. Some of them are bad, and that happens. But I really like this concept, and I genuinely didn't even think about the fact that there wasn't a keyword for in-game, because I thought tourist, and I was like, that's a keyword. And so that didn't even click to me that it's not one that's in the game versus deck building. But I'm really, really excited about it. I like the concept a lot. I like that it opens up deck building, because I think deck building is like such a key component in Hearthstone. And you get to see, I feel like tourist is the kind of thing that will make it so that it is more likely that we will get surprise decks later on in the meta as people refine lists and try out different things of like, oh, can we do a corpse demon hunter or whatever the tourist is? Can we do like a thief rogue with extra tourist stuff? And I am really excited about what opportunities that presents. And I think that it'll open up and make the meta a little less stale for a little longer. And
it's interesting you said dual cards, because when I remember last month or last set, the Badlands one, there were a couple cards that came out in the mini set that were dual class for both Priest and Druid. And they found a home in Druid, and they got nerfed in Druid before they ever found a home in Priest. So that probably kind of felt bad for Priest. So I like this concept. It's going to make it a little interesting. Again, I'm disappointed that they didn't have the keyword for the set, but I'm not horribly disappointed. JustAGuy, I'd ask you what you think about Tur's keyword, but I know it just means Sage is awesome and great and everything and wonderful. So I'm going to ask you, are there any
I can give you an opinion that isn't just a blanket statement about the magnificence of my children.
Are you sure?
I like the idea. My first thought when I heard about it was that it really was going to appeal to a lot of people who enjoy the complexity of deck building. And I thought that was a really nice thing to add. I think obviously it was a very measured way of adding this to the expansion, obviously not allowing you to use any, past sets, not allowing you to use future sets. It's very limited. It includes 9 cards from an alternate archetype that would not have been available to you. I think that's a lot of interesting possibilities. And I did think, obviously, they did it in a way that wasn't going to just blow up everything. I do also think that, like your reaction, Tito, that, it's sort of interesting. You didn't get sort of a true keyword. I think there's going to be an awful lot of people who hate it. And I think that's also something you can predict when you come out with something that's like this, like anything. You're going to get some people who are like, oh, this is kind of cool. And you're going to get people who shockingly seem to think that if you shout loudly negative things into the wind, that people pay more attention to you. And apparently it validates you as a human being. I would believe that that's actually Reddit's entire slogan. Shout negative things into the wind and you'll be validated as a human being. I think that's
correct.
But yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I do think it makes for some interesting possibilities, some fun deck building, which I think a lot of people are going to have a good time with. And then I think there's going to be a lot of people who just sort of hate on it and go, I can't get cards from this set. And how come this hero gets this hero's cards, but not the same way back? And it's like, oh, yes, you're happy. I'm sorry. Hopefully your mom and dad love you. Not.
Well, and I'm thinking that tourists is kind of like the gateway drug for other ways they can manipulate some of these kind of things. It's a little bit like the marijuana before they get into some more interesting ways to join some of these classes and to expand what you have. Like Magic, you obviously have the 5 colors, and that makes for lots of interesting combos that you can probably kind of figure out with. Maybe Hearthstone is kind of working to move in that direction a little bit, and it's just kind of them testing the waters. Who knows? I think it's interesting. Daniel, are there any cards?
I think drinks. I'm sorry. If as far as sort of keyword analysis goes, I think drinks are obviously a small sample of cards that are going to be available, and they certainly don't like to keyword something that they're not necessarily looking to revisit in future expansions, because it does sort of clutter it a bit. But I do think that if they had wanted to call it a keyword, the drinks is sort of an interesting take on what Echo has been in the past. And there are some cards there. I also really like, as far as the set goes, the focus on locations, because I think that adding 6 new locations and adding cards that discover locations from other heroes is really an interesting thing to incorporate into the game that really hasn't been.
And no, JustAGuy is not actually on the Blizzard payroll directly. No, so like Drinks is actually a lot like Drinks is so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they always have kind of a keyword, and then they have a non-keyword mechanic. Like last one, they had Gigantify and Minimize, Miniaturize, but they also had the wind-up mechanic, which didn't really take off, but that was kind of like their secondary mechanic. No keyword. They do it a lot. And Drinks is kind of like that secondary mechanic that they do that. But as I was about to ask Daniel, are there any cards you're particularly excited about?
The one card that I'm really excited about so far, because we haven't seen a whole lot of cards, right? And so it's tough to see some of these cards and what they might actually look like. But Patches the Pilot looks phenomenal. I'm an aggro demon hunter at my core. I love that deck archetype. I love the way that plays a bunch. It is a 1-mana 1/1 demon pirate. I love that it does both a demon and a pirate. Battlecry, shuffle 6 parachutes into your deck that summon a 1/1 pirate with charge when drawn. And I think that's such a fun take on Patches. I think that's super interesting. I'm a big fan of it. And I'm hoping that this combined with Halveria Darkraven can lead to something, because I miss that card a lot. I love that card. And I'm really excited about that. There aren't a whole lot of others. Again, most of the things we've seen are neutrals, and neutrals tend to be either never played or always played. And it's almost impossible to predict which one those are going to be, but there's usually like 2 neutral cards that end up in every single deck. I'm looking at you, Snake Oil Salesman, and most everything else just really doesn't get played. And I don't think we've seen any of the cards that are going to get played, other than maybe Gorg, and maybe other than 1 or 2. But I don't want to steal all the cards since there's so few.
Steve, what are your thoughts on the cards that I'm assuming it's been made by Sage? So go ahead.
Well, that's a given, but I agree, and not to duplicate here, but I think most people have reacted to Patches very positive. I thought Marin, the manager, was a really good tossing card for everyone just for the announcement. I think that's always been dangerous waters to tread. The card that they give out, they want something that's fun, and they want something that people are sort of excited and shows some of the flavor of the expansion. But in the past, they've occasionally released cards that have sort of really dominated instantly the meta, and they don't want to break stuff, but you also don't want to release something that's like, oh, this card sucks and nobody. I think Marin's a fun card. I saw people complaining that, they didn't even come up with new treasures. It's okay. It actually is cool, because what, were you playing them already? No. So it's actually a fun card that I think they punched in, that I think a lot of people have added to their decks and found space for it. And it does make those treasures are a fun tweak on what cards you are currently playing. And I don't think it busted the game. So I do think that was a really good.
I'm looking forward to AFK. And I don't know if it's going to be a good card or not. It's one of those cards. They've already nerfed it. It was a +3/+3 to all the minions, and now it's not. And I wonder if it originally buffed herself. No idea. It did? Okay. So they've nerfed it already. And it feels like one of those cards that's going to be horrible. You look at it, you're like, there's no way this is going to be good. Like Wheel of Death. Wheel of Death was good until they broke a bunch of other things to make it not good. But it just has that feel to me where it's either going to be absolutely horrible or it's going to be, I don't know, mysteriously good.
It looks so bad, there has to be something good about it that we can't see.
Right, exactly. There's got to be some kind of like wombo combo there that it's just right in the right situation. But so before we move on to the next segment, we're about 50-minute mark. Daniel usually turns into a pumpkin in about 10 minutes, so we're hopefully going to keep him a little longer. I normally plan these shows and I write out the show notes and I have my ideas and whatnot. And I think that there's no way this is going to last an hour, and we haven't even got to the main topic yet, and we're almost there. I didn't factor in 45 minutes of nepotism, but that's okay. So
you should have.
I know, I really should have. So our topic.
Did you not know I was going to be on the show? It seems odd that you didn't just sort of make that the main topic, but go ahead.
So our main topic is improving as a casual player. So I think we have people that listen to the show from all walks of life, and we often talk about ways to handle things if you are a very engaged player. And that's kind of, I thought a lot of people were talking about trying to be better at legend players or improve whatnot, but that's not everybody. Some people may only get like 10 games a week, if maybe they don't play every week at all. So I brought on one of the most casual people I know in JustAGuy, and I also brought in Daniel, who has a podcast, so he's not that casual, but I think you tend to play kind of standard. Sometimes you're really into it, sometimes you're not. So I thought that you'd be a good voice on this. So I wanted to, how can you work on getting better as a player without necessarily playing all that much? Because even if you don't play that much, most people probably still want to be better at the game, right? That's winning is fun. That's where the most fun is, unless your idea of fun is wombo combo, random things. So we have a few suggestions here about how to make the game play fun and also to help you improve in these minimal time investment. The step one, the best thing you can do is to have kids on the dev team. We've already talked about that ad nauseum, but
yes and no, because honestly, I went to Cora, I kid you not, either earlier today or yesterday, and I asked her about something about a deck I was playing and wondered, hey, what about this and whatever. And literally her statement was something along the lines of, I haven't played Standard in months. So I'm like, hold on a second. Don't you design cards for Standard? Yes, all day, every day. And I think they spend a lot of their time playing and duos, because the two of them, and they actually played duos before there was a duos, where they would both be queued up into the same lobby and they would yell back and forth, don't kill me this turn. And hey, I'm going to take these cards. So that was sort of duos before it actually was a thing. So yeah, having them on the dev team is great, but not necessarily towards improving my game. So I'm not sure if that's the expectation that you might.
I really like the concept that they actually helped each other, because the only time that I've ever done that is when I used to do that with Smarms every now and then, and she would be like, I'm going to kill you as fast as I can. I want you to get 8th place ASAP so I can be better than you.
I think the relationship between my kids is dynamically different than yours and Smarms.
I think that's probably true, yeah.
But I was going to say the getting better thing, here's the first thought. And again, I don't know if my experiences are typical of anybody else out there, but my biggest impediment towards getting better at the game is laziness. So when it comes, I honestly find queuing up and looking and researching a new deck that I want to play to just be tedious most of the time. I enjoy it when I do, and I enjoy when I've got something new to play, because I do get bored easily, but I don't put in the effort. I usually, if I've got 15 minutes, I will throw on the deck that I might be sort of dissatisfied with and just play it. The avenue that are available to actually look up decks and go and pick something up from HS Replay or Hearthstone or somebody else and throw that together, or watch a video or watch a streamer, I usually don't take advantage of myself. Listening to a podcast once in a while, sure, Blizzlet hasn't necessarily made me better at the game, unfortunately.
What?
I'm not sure if it was supposed to.
What?
I apparently had been told I don't listen anymore anyway, and then who knows? They started talking about me as it was, so it was kind of odd. But
Daddy,
your
no!
podcast, Tito, and your offerings are certainly more constructive on point.
Okay, so a couple quick things. One, I intentionally threw to Just a Guy to talk about his kids because I needed to do a couple quick things like use the bathroom, walk my dogs, and clean the oven. Now that I was able to get that done, so when I say listen to podcasts, I listened to The Angry Chicken before I even had access to Hearthstone. I was excited for the game. I didn't have access. They had a podcast. I was so happy. I'm not talking about listening to my podcasts. I have 2 of them now, if you didn't know. But yeah, you can listen to my podcast where we talk about Hearthstone. But I'm talking about any podcast, including Blizzlet, especially Blizzlet, because let's say you're not that serious of a player. Blizzlet is a fantastic comedic podcast, as long as you don't mind some swears and a little bit of sexual innuendo. But what I like about it is you still learn about Hearthstone. Sometimes they have a whole week where they talk about Hearthstone and they really actually get into it. And the other 11 months of the year, what might happen is they'd have a little anecdote where you'd have Lore Master Eve, who's one of the fantastic hosts of the show, be like, oh, I hate when I run into this card. And then Daniel would say, yeah, but all you have to do is this and this and this. And yeah, maybe you didn't get a whole breakdown of how to play a deck or whatnot, but then you're going to be in that situation where you're like, oh, I see this card. I know a good solution for that is to do this or to plan for this. So even if it's not like the VS Report podcast or Coin Concede, just imbibing any content in Hearthstone when you're walking your dogs or driving to work, whatever not. If your goal is to play and get back, and the entire concept of this, we're assuming that you play a little bit and you want to get better. Just consuming any content about Hearthstone is going to help you, even if it's not all 100% right. You're going to hear, you're going to listen, and you're just going to absorb, and you're going to learn more just because that's how that works. Anybody else have any thoughts on podcasts before we move on to the next idea?
Nope.
You're 100% correct. And I do listen to a handful and fit them in. I do find that sometimes it's a challenge with walking to work, which you're sort of discussing when it comes to your new podcast. Blister Guy is amazing at describing the game. The biggest problem I have listening to those types of pods is he talks very fast, and I'm not entirely sure if it's English. So
it's mostly.
I try to adapt to some of what he's saying and listen, but then he also says things like the card names all the time, and I know about 6 card names, so it's really hard visually to try to picture the dynamics of what's going on in the games that he's recapping when he's saying cards. My kids have done that for years. Play the whatever. And I went, no, you know better. And they go, okay, play the 3 mana 2/3. And then I know what they're talking about. So some of us are challenged in ways that others may not be. So it's difficult for some of us to try and adapt.
And I listen to podcasts at 1.5 to 1.75 speed. And I am exhausted after listening to Walk to Work because he is already talking so fast. And he just sounds, he's walking, he's out of breath. And I'm like, oh, I'm out of breath too. But by the way, hi, Blister Guy. And suggested maybe you could listen to him at half speed.
Mm.
And agreed.
Sage listens to his stuff like you do, like 2 times, consuming just in a massive amount in such short order. And it literally gives me
anxiety. One last thing that I want to talk about and it's not quite podcast, but it's also, I don't think I see it anywhere else of streams. I think one thing that people often make a mistake in, and I think this is true across the board, is that when they look for, all right, let me look at a player to get better, they look for the best of the best. They look for the people that are high legend. They look for people like Kibler, who's incredibly good at the game, and they go, oh, well, I want to be like them. I encourage you to not necessarily go for the best of the best, because you're basically going from A to Z, but you need to learn the rest of the alphabet first to just understand that. So I always encourage, look for the rank that you think is reasonable for you to get to. So let's say you're a gold player. Look for people that are in that platinum, maybe diamond range, and see how they play first. So that way you can kind of get into that range. And then once you're looking for that, all right, now I need to make that legend push, then look for those kinds of players, because they're in, honestly, very different worlds in how they're playing and the decks that they're playing against and how they're playing against people. And it's not necessarily helpful to get the top tier advice if you're not playing against top tier players, because they'll play in a very, very different way.
a great point. Plus, the meta is dramatically different.
Huge.
At all of the different tiers that you're playing. So what you're watching somebody play as far as an effective deck and the decks they're running into at Legend or even Diamond level when you haven't gotten there yet are not what you're seeing at the lower levels. So it is more appropriate.
Okay, I would recommend the streamer, one streamer, I think his name is Tito Santana, HS. He's playing at Legend often, but I don't think he belongs there. So that may be exactly what Daniel's describing. Also, I'm picturing...
I don't know that having two shills on the same pod, the same episode is really...
Yeah, I'm just going to keep a tally of how many times Tito just goes for himself
Which one of us is working our agenda best?
I have said...
Did you want to plug anything, Daniel?
I don't have anything to plug. Come to the Red Fair,
We've mentioned Blizzlet a couple of times, Squelch once or twice.
I believe I've said very nice things about both Squelch and Blizzlet in this episode.
You have, and I appreciate it.
Well, the guy's sitting right here. Wait till he's gone to talk smack about him.
So I'm also just picturing Smarms, who listens to podcasts at like 7.5 speed, listening to Blister Guy. That's just got to be utterly exhausting. So another thought, in getting back to the seriousness of the topic, is sometimes you can get bored. You can play multiple decks, but if you're trying to get better, maybe just sticking with the same deck or at least the same style of deck can help with that. It gives you some familiarity with the patterns of the deck, and the more you play with it, the more you understand how the deck wins, how the deck loses, and all that. Daniel, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's important to know what you like to play in Hearthstone, and because when you are playing a deck that you like, you'll understand it in a way that is better. Like I can play a control deck fine. I understand it. I get the concepts. But when I play an aggro deck and I play for like hours on end with that just same deck, I get to understand a lot more about it. And I also don't hate the deck by the end of it. Whereas with a control deck, I'll play for 2 hours and I'll be like, I hate everything. And so I think it's important to play decks that you like, because one, you'll enjoy the game more, which will help you learn more about it, but you'll also kind of naturally intuit more stylistic choices. Like if you're an aggro player, you need to better understand when do you go face, when do you trade. If you're a control player, it's when do I use my removal versus when do I hold it. For combo, it's when can I afford to put down my combo pieces, when can I afford to use draw versus removal. And so all of those are really important, very consistent skill questions to ask.
100% agree. The biggest issue, again, is the idea that if you're focusing on the game and you want to get better, there are an amazing amount of resources out there, whether it's a stream, whether it's a podcast, whether it's, focusing on the game and looking at some of the guides that are out there. The biggest issue I have is almost sort of attention deficit issues. It's just, there's nothing I'm arguing about, but I genuinely joked at one point that I play the game on permadeath, that I give a deck one try. If it loses, I delete it and I have to go on to it. So it's just, you have to punish the deck so it understands that if it doesn't perform, you expect better results and you move on until someone does fulfill what your expectations are. So with me, yes, I'll play the same deck a fair amount. Mm-hmm. It's just, there is a point where you're 100% right. You cannot just take a look at a deck and play a dozen games and think that somehow you understand it well enough that you're really playing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes without being able to sort of take a look at somebody else playing that deck or a similar deck, mm-hmm. or somebody else looking over your shoulder while you're playing, which is even better, but obviously not always available.
Yeah.
That having somebody who can, and again, in my house, I have those people, but I'm not always mentally and emotionally able to take the abuse that goes along with it, mm-hmm. because that sucks. Why would you play that? Get good. I can't watch this. It's an absolute joke. You can only hear that so many times.
I imagine you have to hear that a lot.
You know what? And it isn't just Hearthstone. It isn't just because they are so damn good at that. Let me tell you, we used to play Overwatch, and I would on rare occasions queue up into a team, and you have never seen my kind, decent, good-hearted son treat another human being on the face of the earth the way that they treat me when I go 1v1 against somebody that I should have dominated and I get killed.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, I guess I probably should have won that one, but yeah, the words that tend to come out are a little bit less kind.
You just need to get good. That's all it is.
Yes, I've heard that once or twice.
Yeah.
And again, that's what we're talking about here. So
yeah. So
right.
Reading meta reports is important.
Yeah, it sure is. So I'm going to, again, behind baseball. I had to step away because my family just called to say goodnight. They're on vacation. I couldn't not take that call. So these wonderful gentlemen.
For sure.
These wonderful gentlemen just kept on vamping and continue on the topic. So I appreciate you. This is why you have professional podcasters on and also JustAGuy. So
I almost threw it back to you in the middle of your being gone. What do you think about that, Tito? I almost did, but I kept myself from going there.
But if you did that, I could have given an answer when I was editing because I have that power because I'm the editor. So I would have made it work.
Of two different podcasts, I hear.
I've heard that too. All right. So reading meta reports can help too. I like right now. I don't think we have any other really outside of Vicious Syndicate. I'm sure there are others that are
not really
out there, but that's the one. And it's interesting reading. It kind of tells you where things are in the meta. It also, more importantly, I think it also kind of helps you guide you to where it might be going. And if you're only playing a limited amount of games, if sometimes it's better, I always think of the metaphor of it's better to skate to where the puck is going to be. So there's a lot of times it's not worth learning a deck if you think it's going to be not good anymore once they have some nerfs. But if you know what deck is going to be good or what decks might be good after the nerfs comes out, then not only are you ready for it when those changes happen, but you'll also get more mileage out of that deck because it'll be better for longer. So I always try to do, that's what happened with Shadow Priest when that came out. Everyone was talking, hey, Shadow Priest is going to be really good positioned after, I think it was Shaman nerfs. So I was like, great. So I started playing that and I just latched onto it and I loved it.
Well, I've seen recently that they actually post something called patch notes.
Whoa!
Tell you stuff that's coming up. So that's kind of interesting. Thanks, Pete. That's kind of interesting as well. So I've also learned recently that apparently a mulligan is something that, again, if you want to improve your game, being able to trade out some of the cards that you start with for different cards, apparently I understand it's
really helpful.
But there's a difference between reading the patch notes and understanding what's going to be nerfed, and also then understanding what's going to be good after the nerf, because sometimes decks are holding other decks back. Sometimes other decks are just being beat down by these other decks, and knowing what might change and knowing how it might change can kind of advise you for the future. Do either of you ever actually read the meta reports or listen to the meta report podcast?
Nope.
Not I.
It's fair. Okay.
But I will now that you've recommended it.
I always look at it, like I will open it up each week and be like, oh, this is the deck, and I'll grab the deck code, and that's about all I do.
That's fair.
Pasting a deck code is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
You have to type in each of those characters one at a time, and there's
I have you heard about this crazy thing called copy and paste? JustAGuy?
Wait a second. Is that like an emoji of some
It's
kind?
really similar to emojis, yeah.
I bet the keyboard is involved somehow.
It sure is, yeah.
It's been around since Windows 3, so I think you can probably handle it. I don't know if it worked in Windows ME, but it definitely has been around for a long, long time.
So Windows is a computer software. It's not just the thing in your house that lets you see outside. So that's what we're referencing with regards to this.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, you have to understand that back in 1996, when I opened my software and computer store, I was installing DOS 6.22 on computers. So I'm not sure I ever got past that point. And you're right, Windows 3.0 was a short-lived version before 3.1, and then 3.1.1 for workgroups, and we had 95, 98.
Wow, look at your
we went
knowledge
through the whole,
of 90s computer software.
I actually have lived that, believe it or not.
So,
but that's okay.
So there are communities you can
I still
join.
don't do emojis.
So there are communities you can join. A lot of them are centered around podcasts, but not all of them. A lot of streamers have their own Discords. A lot of podcasts have their own Discords. Some good ones are especially Coin Concede. Even if you're not participating and you don't feel comfortable engaging with other folks, I still encourage you to do that, because you can not only just read what's going on and see what people are excited about or see what people are angry about, but you can also occasionally, if you need to, you can ask a question. People are so helpful there. You can ask, hey, I didn't understand this interaction, and people will explain to you. They won't just say, get good, noob. They will explain, oh, this happens because death rattles resolve before reborn, or whatever it might be. So you can really get a lot out of those communities just asking simple questions. And you can post replays in there, which we've talked about many times. I'm gonna say this, even if you don't play a lot, you can still use a recording tool like HS Replay and get your replays and post them and still get valuable insight to, hey, maybe you're looking at this all wrong. Maybe you should be doing something different. And people are very friendly and people are very helpful in all those. Even if you, some podcasts you need to be a patron for, like say Blizzlet, but we're paying $1 a month and getting into that wonderful Discord with those wonderful people. You learn a lot. You get some access to some great people and some great information, and very friendly. And for $1,000, you get some feet pics. It's a whole thing.
True. A lot of options.
The Discords even have a lot of people who are willing to do tutoring and do some, play against you, look over your shoulder while you're playing and streaming, and be able to give you that sort of instant feedback on choices. And that's actually, reading about it is great. And obviously watching somebody stream a deck that's similar to what you're playing is going to give you some insight. But I don't know that there's anything faster than having somebody looking over your shoulder while you're playing and asking you questions like, okay, now which card are you thinking about playing? You do co-op streams, which are sort of along the exact same line. So having somebody who's not just sort of playing the deck and you're trying to figure out what plays they're making that are better than what you're doing, but that are actually looking at you and saying, okay, now look at the cards in your hand and which one are you thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about this. Okay, well, what about this instead? Have you considered this is what's going on, and this is probably what you're going to see your opponent play with the deck that he's playing over the next couple of turns? And these are things that the average player has a really hard time with. So that's something that actually is a resource in the Discords that a lot of people will give you a hand with if you join the right one and pay the right money.
You don't have to play with somebody better than you either. And you don't have to play with, you can coach with anybody. You can co-op with anybody. And it's just that conversation. Sometimes, and even talking out loud can help. Like, even if you don't have somebody to do that, and talking through your plays and verbalizing them, but just going back and forth with somebody, and you say, hey, I was thinking about playing this 1/1 and then this 2/2 and then doing the hero power. And they're like, well, we could do this, but we could also do this. And they might consider lines that you're not considering. So if you have an opportunity to just co-op with somebody, it doesn't have to be on stream. You can get on these Discords, you can get whatever, and get on a call privately and do that. So I think it's a lot of fun. Daniel, you do a little bit of that too, right?
Yeah, sometimes. I'll be honest, it isn't often that I do that kind of stuff, but every now and then it's a lot more like people will be like, hey, I'm struggling with this thing or this kind of deck I'm frustrated with, and then I can usually provide a little bit of text information of like, hey, consider these types of things, or this type of deck, or this kind of counter.
That's fair. So another thing you can think about, and we got a couple more topics here. I know we're getting a little long in the tooth there. Don't necessarily focus on you winning and losing. Like, I know that seems counterintuitive to say because you want to get in there and you want to win, but sometimes, especially if you're not as wired in as we are, when we know that X deck and Y deck are, better or worse than the others, you might be running into a matchup that is unfavored. And it almost doesn't really matter what you do. It's likely they're going to win. So if you just focus on playing the best you can and making right choices and understanding and working on understanding on why you made good choices versus bad choices, and understanding maybe why you lost there and it wasn't anything you could do about it, or they were going to win inevitably, or maybe you can sneak out a win in a way that you weren't expecting. Just kind of don't focus so much on the wins and losses if that's not your thing, and just focus on just playing as best you can. And as you go over time, that's going to, I think, make a difference. And it kind of goes along the lines with the episode that we had a few weeks ago, Wiki Good. We talked, I think it was one of our longest episodes in a while, where we talked about all the silly mistakes you could make. And we spent like an hour just talking about that. And that is a lot of information. It is information overload. You're not going to remember how to keep track of all that things at once. So don't. Just figure out where you mess up more often and focus on that. Like right now, I have played a metric ton of Buff Paladin. I have played so much of it. And there are still times when I screw up my sequencing, when I have a South Sea deckhand and a weapon and a buff and whatnot. And I got to play the deckhand and then swing and then do the buff and then do the thing. And I still screw that up and I have to slow down. And I need to focus on that. So if you just focus on a couple of things at a time, one thing at a time, two things at a time, whatever it might be, you solve those, then you can work on the next things, and you're going to get better just by fixing those. Any thoughts on that there, Daniel?
Yeah, I think that there's this concept in psychology about like intrinsic versus extrinsic mindsets of like, don't focus on the wins, focus on how you play, focus on how you feel, focus on how you can improve. And I think that's really important with regards to especially video games, because we can get really, really frustrated or overwhelmed. And I think just thinking to yourself, all right, what were the plays that I made? What would have happened if I had done something differently? And focusing on it holistically rather than game by game. Or sometimes people just curve out perfectly and they hit Reno a 9 and you lose the game. That happens. And try to avoid getting frustrated by small instances and look at things on the large basis instead, and just get better each time.
And that's a good point. If like if you lose 3 games in a row and you're just like tilted off your brain, step away. Especially if you're not like streaming and you're a very casual player, come back to it tomorrow. Come back to it in an hour. Because otherwise all you're going to do is you're going to be jaded, you're going to be not as focused, and you're probably going to be angry, and you're not going to make good plays. You might play like JustAGuy. JustAGuy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know what? I notice every bad play I've ever made instantly. So I 100% agree. I actually, and this is not a joke, I would love an undo button. Marvel Snap added it. And not to always make apples to apples comparisons, it's an entirely different game. But if you hit the end turn button and your opponent has not ended their turn yet, you can now undo your turn and take your play. Because I literally see my misplays right after I end my turn. So being able to and again, slow down is the perfect advice. But occasionally you tend to get distracted while you do these things. So I wouldn't mind, sort of that senior edition of, the longer rope, the undo button, the bigger font, but being able to actually slow down and undo something because it happens all the time. I see it. That sort of misordering of the cards you're playing with hand buff Paladin happens to me all the time. And I know it instantly as soon as I did it wrong. I just would like to
real
redo
quick, when you said to your kids, hey, can we get an undo button in Hearthstone? Did they laugh for like 2 or 3 days? Like
my kids are happy to tell me all the things they are not in charge of and have nothing to do with. And that's one of those that sends it. I will say that I did in a form get not an undo button, but a confirmation button when it comes to purchasing the golden mini set. So I have
you gotta avoid accidental JustABuys. We've been over this.
100. That's the one time I read the patch notes. I will absolutely tell you that my legacy long after I'm gone is going to be the fact that exists.
That's correct.
But yes, an undo button would not be a bigger button. Cards that sort of didn't immediately jump around my screen as though I were touching them when I'm not. That would be.
Yep. But
you're right. Slow down is great advice. It's not always easy to sort of remind yourself.
So, you got any final thoughts there, JustAGuy, on the topic of playing as a casual player and getting better?
I do think everything you've suggested makes a lot of sense. I think that the biggest thing is that you have to be motivated to want to sort of achieve a certain goal. I think getting better is great, but it tends to be a little. We see a lot of people in the Discords and a lot of people on Twitter that are posting their first time legend. I've noticed quite a bit this month. And that's fantastic. I think that going from somebody who I've seen a lot of people talk about how they never got out of gold, it's just sort of the level they play at and the amount of time they spend. I think you really do have to set some objectives that are reasonable and steps along the way. I don't think you ever never get out of gold and say, my goal is to get the legend, because that's a really high bar to try and set for yourself with a huge gap between where you are and how you're going to get there, and not necessarily knowing. Just putting in more time isn't necessarily going to. Playing more isn't, like you said, sometimes playing more is you're going through, 7 losses in a row and you get burned out and now you're hating on the game. So I think it's a constructive way that you're going to try and tackle it, and you're going to try and set some goals, like play a little bit more to start with. Like if you've never gotten out of gold, let's get to platinum this month and see what we can do. So it is a matter of figuring out what you can do that actually makes sense, and then the right steps along the way to try.
I have a new viewer in my chat that's just been here for about a week, or maybe a few days now. A wonderful person. Their name is Meowton of Cats. It's got to be a Electric Sheep City alt. Meowton of Cats. But they hit legend. They said, I just started playing last week and I got my first legend. And I'm looking about this. I was like, oh my goodness. It took me like 4 years to get legend for the first time. But don't be intimidated if it takes you a while. Some people are really quick because they play from other games. Some people are not. Daniel, you got any final thoughts?
Nope.
My final thought is, if you are playing in a limited time and you want to get better, remove the other distractions. Play Hearthstone. If you're playing like 5 games of Hearthstone and you want to get better, get rid of stop watching Real Wives of New Jersey or stop, get off Twitter. Just get there and focus on the game. And it's hard to do. I know it is.
Lose your job, send your family on vacation.
That helps. That does help. But seriously, if you're distracted by everything and you're watching something, you're not paying attention to what your opponent's doing, you're not going to do as well. So remove distractions. But other than that, hopefully these things help. I'd love to know if any of the things resonated with you. So if you email us at breadandbutter@gmail.com, we'd love to hear from you. You could also tweet at us, bread, butter, Hearthstone. So Daniel, just a guy. We'll start with Daniel. Given that we usually ask a question, kind of like a final interview question before we move on to the end, and we've talked, the theme is now kind of holidays and vacations. What is your dream vacation?
I have such a basic answer.
That's okay.
My dream vacation is to go to Orlando, Florida, the mecca of theme worlds, and I would go to Disney World, and I would go to Sea World, and I would go to Orlando Studios and their new monster theme park that's coming up in a few years. And the dream of it would have to be on someone else's dime, or I'd have to win the lottery, because I would be so worried about money every single step of the way of like, I'm sorry, $25 for a corn dog? Guess I'm not eating today. But I love theme parks. I love rides and amusement parks and roller coasters and things of that nature. So anything that I can just go in between all the different amusement parks is my heaven.
You just told me that you're ready to be a dad, because that's all I do on vacations. Is like, why? Wait, we just had a snack and we have dinner at 5:00. Why are we having a snack now where we paid for our dinner? We don't need something else. So I understand that completely.
And I would love to have a little fanny pack while I'm around at Disney World for sunscreen, water, snacks, whatever it needs be. So I'm ready to embrace the dad energy, even if I'm not a father.
That's fair. Just a guy. What would your dream vacation be?
Let me tell you what my worst vacation is.
That wasn't the question.
On that a second. I'll tell you this one first. I'm 18 years old, and I've just broken up with my girlfriend, vice versa. And my family, because my dad was a doctor and rarely was able to take time off, my mother would insist on a 2-week vacation over the summer because we had sort of else. We went to the Bahamas. 18 is the gambling and drinking age. So I'm excited to go there. It's a beautiful beachfront resort, expensive as heck. I don't have to pay a dime. I'm sponging off my dad like I did as best I could. And we're going to go there, and I'm going to gamble, and I'm going to drink, and I'm going to have a party. And as the plane is descending to land, I start throwing up. And it wasn't plane throwing up. It was, this is kind of weird throwing up. We landed, got off the plane. My dad put me in a cab. Everybody went to the hotel except for me and my dad. My dad took me to a medical lab that was as close to us as possible. And I had blood tests done. And I spent the next 13 of 14 days with mono, growing up in a room with my grandmother because nobody else would come around me. And I was dying up until that final last day. That was the worst vacation I have ever been on in my life.
I had mono once.
How's that for a vacation story?
I had mono once in college, and the doctor said I was like a normal person after 3 cups of coffee when I had mono because I was fine. I had so much energy. They were like, you need to slow down because you're going to pop your spleen. But, and I like a picture right now is your dad on the plane kind of standing up and asking, is there a doctor on the plane? Oh, wait.
Having your dad take you in a cab to get blood work done, the first thing on vacation was really an experience. He obviously knew there was something going on. Best vacations, just not to ignore your question, it tends to be the family stuff. I've talked a little bit in Discord and on Twitter about my kids. We went to Frankenmuth, Michigan, to the Bavarian Inn there, and they have the world's largest Christmas store in that town, and they have all kinds of cheese, many cheeses, lots of cheese. And that was it was a very disappointing hotel, and the food was very disappointing. But they had a game room that my kids absolutely dominated for the time we were there, to the point where I think we had prizes that literally paid for our vacation. My kids will tell you that vacation 7 years ago, like now, this minute, we were there playing Pop the Lock, which apparently is a game that one of Cora's coworkers actually worked on. Is something that they will never forget. The rest of the vacation was just ass, but the game room pretty much salvaged the entire time and did have a blast.
Listeners, I know I asked you this earlier, and I don't want to revisit the bits, but if you leave us a review, it helps us out. You can do it at iTunes, which is like breaking into Fort Knox. I understand that. But if you go to bonusroll.gg, it's a lot easier. While you're there, if you're listening to Bread and Butter, it is very likely you're listening to Coin Concede or Squelch or Blizzlet. I understand this. Give them all a review. Because what we do is hard. Not hard as in it's a lot of work. And we do it out of joy. We love the game. We love the communities. But the little bit that you can do to help other people find us is huge. So if you can just, while you're there, just knock a few of them out. Say, hey, Stormraige is awesome. Say, Wicked Good and Edelweiss and everybody's awesome. Just give them a little nod on that. And it makes people feel good. And it really helps us find an audience. So, we talk about this every week. Just if you can, do it. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. JustAGuy, where can people find you on social media?
They can find me here and there posting on Twitter at JustAGuy66. Upon occasion, not as much lately, they can find me on YouTube, JustAGuyHS. I'll try and turn up a little bit more.
What does the 66 from JustAGuy stand for?
It's the first car I ever.
Ah, fair enough. Stormraige, where can people find you?
You can follow me. I'm at Stormraige23, Rage spelled Raige. You can also follow Blizzlet on at Blizzlet and Squelch at Squelchcast. And
just so you know, Raige is the proper spelling of Stormraige now. That was confirmed by DeckTech.
Yep.
And you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Tito Santana HS. JustAGuy, do you have any shout outs this week that aren't your children?
I'll give you 2 quick ones, sincerely. Number 1 would be Jay over at This Week in Hearthstone. He does really good work. He's done an awful lot of time and effort and creativity in putting together his YouTube channel. He puts out some really good videos. So pay attention to him. I really do think he deserves more than he gets. And the other shout out I would give is to everyone who plays this game and doesn't bitch. Everybody who plays this game and does it without criticizing every card that they don't think is good or every change and balance to the meta and every expansion without having to stand up on a soapbox and try and get everyone's attention to talk about how unhappy they are and how it's ruined their life. I do think it would be nice to have a little bit less of that every now and then, because I have heard that Hearthstone is a game and games are supposed to be.
So quick note on Jay. He's a fellow teammate of mine now on Amber Flake Gaming. And you might have heard I started a second podcast. Entire reason I did this is because I was going to make a YouTube show, and that was hard. And I started editing it. I started putting in like pictures and stuff like that. I said, you know what's a lot easier? Doing a podcast. So the work that Jay does is fantastic. His name is This Week in Hearthstone. Yeah, he's definitely worth giving a follow. He's been on the show before. He'll be on the show again. So yeah, send him some love. Stormraige, do you have any shout outs this week?
Yeah, I'll shout out the Corian Sage.
Are we tied now? I think Tito pulled ahead with mentions of his 2 podcasts over my mentions of my 2 children.
No, we didn't. And we're not even close, I don't think. Especially if we're talking about minutes engaged.
No, we're talking about individual assessment, individual times where we actually mentioned it, not the length and duration. So
I'm going to shout out to Doc, who I know really wanted to be here. And so Daniel, I don't know if you saw, we have to have you on again before school starts, because otherwise, Dan, we're probably not going to, Doc's going to be sad if we don't get you back on again.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do that. I'm going to shout out Dragon Rider Dawn, who gave me the code, which was awesome. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. And also Blister Guy, who's given me some good feedback on another project that I've been working on. And we won't mention what that is. And also to Draco Cat and Judge, who are going to be on my stream this week to do some co-oping. Draco Cat hasn't played in a while as far as streaming, so we're going to have him on. We're going to play some Demon Hunter. And I'm going to be doing, and that's going to be Wednesday night between 5 and 12 Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to have Judge on to do some arena, I believe, Friday night. There will be beverages involved. So I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, guys, I think we're toast. We'll see you.
Goodbye.
Later.
Slide 2 brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.